Welcome to the Entuity webinar series. Today's topic is enterprise class network management. It's not just for the big guys anymore. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend. I'm John Diamond, and I'm the product manager at Entuity. And here with me is my colleague, Pete Barth, who is a systems engineer also at Entuity. Pete also brings a wealth of experience and an interesting perspective from a past life managing one of the largest private wireless networks in the USA. We are both going to be your hosts for this session. Today's webinar will illustrate the top 5 enterprise-class features that we think will add an extreme amount of value to your network management capabilities. So, when it comes to evaluating what features to look for in trading up for a more advanced network management solution, you should consider these as being a good foundation from which to start. Let's take a quick look at the major driving forces behind what really constitutes an enterprise approach to network management. The way it tends to be differentiated from other types of organization is that there is a major focus on making sure that excessive costs and inefficiencies in the whole area of network management are front and center in the planning for how to go about network management in general. That they're not an afterthought. It is foremost in the planning procedure, and that's because, frankly, the performance of the network is fundamental to the performance of the enterprise. Almost all enterprises these days are utterly dependent on their IT infrastructure, and IT is held together by the network. If the network lets them down, then everything will be let down. So we've picked 5 types of concept, you might call them features, that we find that are often discussed and are central in our discussions with enterprise class customers. And we think that these are fairly representative of the types of issue that will come up time and time again. And the first one we liken to the concept of herding cats. If you've ever had to influence more than one of these felines, then you'll know what I'm talking about here. We consider that when you're dealing with an environment that is using a multitude, often of disconnected management tools, focusing on individual small topics, such as identifying the root cause of problems, trying to create a topology map of what the network comprises, identifying faults in real time, and looking after aspects of configuration, and maybe monitoring it and maybe pushing out configuration changes, and a whole variety of other topics, including flow monitoring, and even possibly path and route monitoring. All of those topics, if they're handled by disparate tools, that is a recipe for inefficiency, and along with that, hidden cost, which may not be immediately apparent, particularly if some of those tools are free or shareware. That free does not mean that the total cost of ownership is zero. Far from it, in fact. And that's an often misunderstood concept. So the real issues that we're up against, and our customers, our enterprise customers, are frequently very concerned about, is that when they're coming from an environment where there's a multitude of tools, there is a heavy staff overhead, having to understand and learn the workflows of multiple tools, even if each individual tool is a smaller entity than an overall network management product that would be handling all of the concepts. The fact that you've got different tools with different user interfaces becomes a major concern for staffing. You end up with what gets termed swivel chair monitoring, where even if you've got user interfaces which can be displayed on the same screen, you're jumping between them, whether they're actually on different screens or you're clicking around them on the same screen. You've still got disparate user interfaces, which makes for a complicated environment. When you've got data being gathered by multiple different tools, then you end up with data silos. So this data is not being shared amongst the tools, and that can be quite an issue. Fundamentally, there needs to be a knowledge of what the network comprises to efficiently move on and perform other functions such as root cause analysis, fault identification, performance monitoring, and all of the other aspects. They really all hinge off a unified understanding of what the network comprises. And if each tool is trying to achieve that independently, they're often as not going to be out of sync with each other. You often have different requirements, hosting requirements for different tools, maybe even different operating systems, certainly on a frequent basis, different database server requirements, and the list goes on. And that just complicates maintenance. And particularly if there are any integrations in place, then dealing with version upgrades of one tool in isolation from other tools can produce quite a problem. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Pete at this point. Pete, did you encounter major problems with multiple tools before you moved up to an enterprise class management tool to look after your network?
Yeah, JD, I really did. I had a scenario where we definitely had multiple tools, and it started in looking at one tool to solve one problem, then another tool to solve another problem. And then when you're done with that, you end up with so many tools that really still don't give you visibility into what's going on in your network, and ultimately it's driving up your cost. And the concept of swivel chair monitoring for me was a big deal because I could not be proactive and transparent in what the network was doing for my customers. And what's interesting is as we talk with other organizations, they have that same story that says fragmented solutions are really driving up the cost of providing management of my network, and I'm still not getting what I need. And then when we also talk with some of the smaller organizations, they'll look at all these different aspects of monitoring that they'd like to be able to do, but they anticipate the amount of effort it's going to take to do it. And because of that, they're going to very much be focused on things like a break-fix scenario. So only respond if something's broken. And it's interesting, as we've been talking about, this presentation, and even earlier this week, I actually had a conversation with someone who was responsible historically for a very large enterprise. They had a very large network. They had a very complex network. And his response to me was they did a good job of monitoring the network, but it required a lot of people and a lot of consulting support and a lot of cost. And now that he's actually in a smaller organization, he's got a resource set that is much lower, and he can't justify that level of resource to provide that same level of support. So we continued the conversation, and we talked about what are the aspects of monitoring that are really important. And if you could actually focus that together into an all-in-one solution where things are really delivered in a comprehensive manner, what would the value of that be? And we talked about some of the values, and one of the first things is a comprehensive depth of visibility into what's going on in the network, not just up and down, not just break-fix types of scenarios, but other aspects of monitoring, and he needs that visibility. So that visibility is really important. And the other thing is if you've got an efficient solution, the organizations that have all those tools, or even the organizations that have got one tool that are really focusing on break-fix, can extend into these other aspects of monitoring and provide a much more complete solution and more efficiencies of monitoring the network for their business. And they can do that at a lower cost. So the end result, if you're looking, when you want to look at an all-in-one solution, is that improved visibility, understanding what's really going on the network, and use that visibility to be proactive in how you manage the network, because the ultimate goal is going to be looking at a more efficiently run network. So let's talk about some of those components that really are included underneath that visibility umbrella. First off, understanding what's on your network. Plain and simple, what's the inventory? What are the components within my inventory, and what do you have? Without that, it's hard to take that next step. But use that information and take the next step and actually look at performance. Do you have capacity bottlenecks going on right now? Do you have devices that are in a position to starting to be overloaded? Do you have firewall problems that you don't know about it, and firewall performance issues? So understanding performance is yet that next step that you can actually include as part of that integrated solution. Understand availability. Is it up, is it down? That's important. But take that a step further and understand what is really the cause of an outage. So is it, if I see a lot of things go down at one time, what's really being that problem? So understanding availability and understanding the true cause of that problem is really important. Extend that and understand how devices are connected across your network. We'll talk about topology a little later in the presentation, but you really need to know how things are connected, again, in order to really spot the true cause of a problem. Extend that into other aspects of network management. How are devices configured? Are device configurations changing? And do you also have the ability to push configurations out into the environment? Understand application behavior, especially if you're an environment that's got multiple sites and you want to understand, what are the applications that are really being used across your environment, and how is that driving the performance of some of your critical WAN links. Take all of that information that you can collect and provide a very usable and complete interface that allows you to get access to reports and dashboards and do event correlation. And do this for all the devices on your network, not just your switches, not just your routers, but all the critical components that are being managed and being included as part of your overall management fabric. So doing this within a single product is critical. It allows you to maintain your overhead. It allows you to ultimately drive the cost of managing your solution lower and provides much better visibility. It allows you to be transparent in what your network is really doing and how it's supporting your business. But to take that a step further, finally, you want to look at scalability. So you want to be able to scale both in terms of your technology and your size, because that's what's going to happen over time. So JD, how do you see scalability being a critical factor for this type of management solution?
Oh, it certainly is. It is with our enterprise customers. That's one of the key points that comes up in conversation. And even if an organization is currently running a network that really can be comfortably monitored from a single monitoring server, there's always a need to think about the future. One of the rules of network management is that networks almost never shrink. They almost always grow in complexity and size. And the monitoring requirement is largely driven by the number of unique points in the network, number of components that need to be individually monitored. And these days, modern switched networks, the component that you're likely to have the most of are the individual ports or interfaces on the switches. Switches quite often will have multiple tens of ports. It's not unusual to have something like an average of 50 ports per device. And if you're performing proper monitoring, that means monitoring all of those ports as well as the behavior of the device and other aspects of what's going on within the device, maybe at an individual board or card level, at VLAN level, at all of the individual resources of multiple processors and memory pools and other aspects that are going on. But one way or another, there's a lot of information that needs to be monitored in order to be fully aware of what's going on the network. And as the network grows in size, there will come a point with any solution where you're going to need to move from using a single server to multiple servers in order to cope with it. Now, that may come through gradual growth of the network. It might also come from an acquisition or merger with another company. And under those circumstances, there may be a step function in the size of the network that needs to be handled by one team. And if you've not planned to be able to grow your network management approach, that can be very disruptive if you either have to totally replace it with a different product or re-architect the existing deployment to move to a different way of working. For example, if the only practical way to move beyond the capability of a single server is to deploy individual polling servers that just gather data and pass that raw data back to a central server, that's a very different architecture from the original single server deployment where the server was doing all of the polling itself. So if you can find a company and a product which will enable you to take a single server deployment and conveniently and easily and non-disruptively move it out from a single server to multiple servers without the need for re-architecting, you're going to be in a much better position for the future. The key thing is when you're deploying a multi-server style network management architecture, you want to avoid bottlenecks. And if you're pulling all of that raw data back to one server, that server in the middle and the database server involved in it, that is by definition going to be your bottleneck. And that's to be avoided at all cost. So that's the key aspect there, that the individual servers need to have a good capability in terms of the size of network that they can manage themselves, but they also need to be able to scale out into a multi-server deployment in a convenient way. And as far as scalability goes, one of the aspects when you're dealing with a large network, as Pete mentioned a little while back, is understanding the topology. When you've got a large, complicated network, it becomes more than you can sketch on the back of a napkin at the diner at lunchtime. So, Pete, how did you handle topology and understanding a large, ever-changing network?
Thanks, JD. Yeah, actually, I look at this slide and I look at the drawing, and this is really something that I spent a lot of time doing. I would actually sit in a coffee shop and talk about how devices are connected and actually be doing manual sketches. We actually did manual planning for network upgrades by doing a sketch on the back of a napkin, and it's really inefficient. So understanding in an automated sense the topology that you've got within your network, you can go ahead and go to the next slide if you want, is something that you really want to spend time understanding. So it's really important to know how devices are connected. Without understanding how devices are connected, it's really pretty tough to understand what's going on, and if you've got a problem, what's really the source of that problem. You want to be able to leverage some of the topology that you can gather, again, from an automated sense, to use for other functions as well. So in my case, and as I talk to organizations, whether they're large or whether they're smaller, it doesn't really matter. You need to be able to document what your network looks like. And again, as JD mentioned, the network is never shrinking. It's always changing. So updating in a manual sense the topology and the as-built documentation for what your network is takes time. So again, something that you can do, automate that, and make it so that you don't have to spend the time manually making those drawings. Integrate that function into a consistent platform, that whole all-in-one concept to be able to do that. So, from an automation standpoint too, if I'm looking at a topology, go ahead and flip over to the next slide and we can take a look at an example. Is, the manual topology, if you had to draw this and maintain this by hand or even create the topology within your product in a manual sense, is going to drive up your support cost. And ultimately, this drawing that you're looking at here, if it's not automated and kept up to date automatically, is going to become outdated. So in addition to that piece where you can actually have the product have your software do the work for you and maintain an up-to-date topology, you also want to make sure that that topology is complete. Don't just look at layer 2 connectivity. Don't just look at layer 3 connectivity or routing connectivity. Be able to look at a comprehensive view of your topology and be able to drill into any aspect of that to be able to focus and understand more about either what that group of devices are doing or what's happening on the network and how they're connected. So you've heard us refer to automation really throughout the presentation, especially when we're looking at different aspects of network management. But JD, how really important is automation?
Oh, it's really at the root of looking after a large network. As we've been mentioning, these networks are horrendously complex. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of different points in the network, devices and subcomponents that need to be monitored and kept in sync with everything. Even a device that does not have any wiring changes, no plugs being moved, no equipment being moved, can have changes going on in its internal configuration that will have implications on how it needs to be monitored. And if you're not staying on top of these changes automatically, these days the networks are just too complex to rely upon a tool that needs manual care and feeding. This must all be heavily automated. And that goes all the way back to the original installation of the software and the way that it's configured before you even start using it. As much automation there as possible, minimizing or eliminating, if possible, other software prerequisites so that you're not spending ages installing database servers, configuring them, maybe web servers and other packages before you even get around to installing the main network management system. Eases the introduction and later on the upgrade as new versions come out. You don't really want to be having to handle independent upgrades of database servers, web servers, and various other aspects, including the network management suite itself. If it can all be kept as one product, then that makes your overall ownership expense of managing and maintaining it significantly better under control. The coordination of the data gathering and the way that the data is used, the more automated that can be. If data needs to be passed out to other packages for any reason, the more automated that can be, the better off the overall ownership experience will be. And that extends as well into the whole area of reporting. Now, reporting is a critical function for large enterprises, but it is being increasingly seen as a valuable function of network management for the smaller organizations that used to consider it to be somewhat out of reach. In fact, I know that you spend a lot of time and effort working on reporting and taking value from it in your former life, Pete. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experiences in that area?
Absolutely. The need for reporting, it's really about getting information out of the system. So you spend a lot of time, or the system does a lot of work to collect a wide range of data. Really, if you look at it from a technical aspect, you collect a lot of data, you save it, you want to be able to use it. So reporting is just one of the methods to be able to get the information out. And it's got to be done in a fashion where you can effectively leverage it, depending upon the focus that you want to be able to speak to. So it's all about a story. And, a lot of smaller organizations spend less time looking at reporting, but again, I think, JD, as you mentioned, it's becoming more important over time, but some of the smaller organizations don't want to look at, another product for reporting, and I can't actually get information out of this system without having to do database queries. Reporting needs to be easy, and reporting needs to be complete. So understanding, again, inventory, what's on my network, understanding capital expenses, being able to look at what's being used on my network. Do I have devices that I can reallocate? It's all, again, about the story. Do I look at capacity type of reporting? You want to be able to talk in terms of capacity. What's going on today? Where is it going to be tomorrow? What do I use for planning in order to understand what I have to make changes in my network? Leveraging service performance. So what is service performance? Services can include, from an Entuity standpoint, can include multiple components and look at service availability in aggregate for specific topics, whether it's a remote branch office or some remote location or some aspect of something even in the data center. But looking at taking tactical and operational reporting and moving them to that next level that really looks at the network as a service. The audience for that, again, is going to move from the operational areas into more of the non-IT audiences, whether it's more of a management focus or an application focus. Taking that even a step further and understanding at an executive level, how is the network supporting my business? Again, it's a way to leverage the data that you've already got. An integrated reporting mechanism that allows you to, schedule and run on demand email reports, render in multiple multiple ways, is a reporting method that you want to be able to include. And bringing that as part of a focus within, that all-in-one solution is something that, whether you're a large enterprise or whether you're a smaller enterprise, you can take advantage of it, and it's really efficient, and it doesn't take you a lot of time to do. So ultimately, it's more about leveraging the tools instead of having to spend time managing the tools. So this is an example if we go past some of the reporting and we talk about dashboards. So reporting is a method that you can get information out, you can email reports out, you can look at them online, but dashboards is another way to visualize all the different aspects of things that you're monitoring, whether you're looking at performance, whether you're looking at topology, whether you're looking at kind of the application performance in terms of net flow, whether you're looking at an understanding of how devices are connected and where traffic is traversing your network for specific applications. Dashboards are really important, and they need to be flexible. They can't require configuration in terms of programming to be able to build them. They have to be very easy to build. They have to be flexible and support, again, various layers of your organization, whether it's operational or whether it's management.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. And I think at this point, I'm going to take the opportunity just to summarize what we've been talking about. We've covered those 5 areas of concerns that enterprises often have, but should be borne in mind by smaller organizations that are growing and could well benefit from that same level of concern. One of the driving forces behind our philosophy at Entuity is this all-in-one design principle to keep together all of the functions of network management in one product, so that there is no need for integration, there is no need to synchronize different functions, because they are all automatically synchronized because they are within the same product using the same database. And at the same time, allow that to scale out conveniently and linearly beyond the capabilities of a single server. Make sure that a single server can manage a decent-sized network on its own, but then allow you to scale out without a complete wholesale re-architecting of your approach in order to do so. And the automation aspects that we've talked about have to underpin the whole aspect of the product. Automation is key to efficiency and accuracy. It's not just efficiency. Accuracy comes with that as well. The more human operations have to take place to perform configuration functions on the monitoring solution, the more opportunity for inaccuracy of the data that is being gathered and presented. And that goes particularly to the topic of topology, which is a devil of a job to keep up to date manually with all of the knowledge of the interconnections between the devices as things change in the network, whether they are physical changes or even virtual changes in modern virtualized portions of the network. That has to be kept up to date automatically in order to be usable. And what can we do to benefit from all of this information? Well, that's where the reports and dashboards come in. That's a way of presenting information, and that information is a form of communication. You are communicating with your user community, and that user community can go beyond the traditional network management community, the network operators. It can go further out up the stack into the executives and also into the application owners in various parts of the organization. They are a legitimate extension of the traditional user community. And that allows them to attain a deeper visibility into what it takes to keep the network performing well, and the performance metrics that they need to be on top of to identify issues that are going to be dragging down performance. If you are efficiently and accurately taking advantage of the data that's being gathered, that's one way of helping keep those costs down, even down to things like identifying which ports on your access layer switches are being used and which ones are free and able to be redeployed will mean that you can efficiently keep an eye on reusing equipment rather than just buying new equipment as the demands on the network increase. You can have a more programmatic and planned purchasing procedure. The way that your network is organized and the ability to group together functions and actually define services, as Pete mentioned, is critical. It's a concept above the ordinary level of network management. Network management traditionally has focused on individual components, devices, ports, circuits, processors, memory, individual components that can be monitored. But those components do not operate in isolation. They operate as part of a bigger system. And identifying which subset of components are operating together and are interdependent and required for the provision of which business service means that if you monitor them as a group, then you can perform service level monitoring and identify a subsystem, a sub-assembly of part of the network and treat it as a whole rather than only looking at individual components. That's an important level of abstraction above the plain ordinary form of network management. And at the end of it, the goal is to reduce the staff overhead for performing the network management function and allow staff to be redeployed to work on future projects and other more worthwhile operations. The network management function should be there to aid your organization, not to drain resources from it. And that's a very critical point that can be overlooked in overall planning. Well, I would like to thank everybody for attending today. We really hope you found this session helpful. Enterprise class network management features will definitely put your network on the fast track for keeping your business moving at Mark speeds. If you've got any questions or would like to discuss any of what we've been talking about or more, given Entuity's experience with network management going back many years and the products that we have available to address the enterprise and other forms of industry, then do feel free to contact us. The best email address is info@entuity.com. We look forward to hearing from you.